I'm here with Tana Crosby from Crosby Milan. Tana is from the US, and the US is actually quite a big market for us now. So good morning, Tana.
Good morning.
Lovely. Thank you very much for coming to see us today.
Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. Let's kick off with, well, tell us a little bit about, your story, who you are. Tell us a little bit about Crosby Milan, please.
Sure. So Crosby Milan is a real estate consulting and legal advisory firm that we started here on the Costa del Sol. So we provide traditional real estate agency services, anything that you would get from a typical real estate agency here. And we also provide legal services in-house. So my partner is a lawyer, and in a previous life, traveled all over the world working for the UN as a lawyer and an investigator, actually. In addition to legal services, in my previous life, I was an actuary working in financial and management consulting. And so we also, in addition to legal services, provide a more thorough financial evaluation of the property purchase. We only work with buyers. We don't work with sellers in any capacity. So we really specialize in advocating for the buyer throughout the purchase process. I'm from the US, as you mentioned. I grew up in Wisconsin, and I went to school in Texas at the University of Texas at Austin, and I spent my professional career working in New York. I've been in Malaga for 2 years, and I'm really loving it in Malaga, really happy here, and I think it's a great place to live and also a great financial investment.
Fluent Finance Abroad, we're a finance company, so we try and analyse the financials of everything else, and it was quite clear when we first spoke that your actual work history and your knowledge of from the business that you've been in New York. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to get to know you a bit more, because I wanted to explore a bit more about how you see the real estate market. So coming in, so why Spain, and why particularly Malaga and the Costa del Sol?
Yeah, so from a real estate perspective, so Spain and the Costa del Sol in particular is a really interesting investment, I think. We are really focused on data and making decisions based on data, especially given my background. So we have been doing a lot of market research, producing a lot of intellectual capital to help guide our clients in making these decisions. And it's really clear to me that, this is a very stable market. The Costa del Sol in particular has, a very stable history of tourism, has a very stable economy. There's a lot happening here from an economic perspective that's really interesting. There's a lot of development. So I think, it's a really stable economy and stable investment in general. There is limited supply here and a lot of demand for a lot of different reasons. There was a new digital nomad visa that was approved early last year, finally. You have, the Golden Visa program, for example, in Portugal that was terminated. I think those, are both going to be driving some demand. And in general, there's always been demand. It's a great place to be, and people are more and more interested. Hopefully, you and I were talking about this earlier, hopefully, interest rates and inflation rates will keep dropping, which will, of course, strengthen consumer purchasing power and continue to drive even more demand. But I think that's, the story of Spain, and especially the Costa del Sol now overall is limited supply and very, very strong demand for a lot of reasons.
You spent some time in France, and Alejandro spent time in Italy. You speak French, I understand. Why did you choose Spain rather than France or Italy? What was it about Spain that you thought it was the place?
Spain has a little bit of everything. I think Spain is a really balanced place. There's a lot of variety in Spain in every sense. There's variety in culture, in history, in food, in nature. From a personal level, we love to hike. I have 2 dogs. We're exploring all the time. There's a lot to explore, and there are a lot of different things to experience here. So other than it being very stable and comfortable and secure, there's just a lot to discover. I mean, it's really a magical place. It sounds cheesy, but it is. And, also from a lifestyle perspective, I think it's very flexible. People here are, really nice and really flexible. It's more relaxed, obviously. So from Alejandro's perspective, I think, he's from Murcia.
Okay.
So, he grew up in Spain, and it's obviously nice to be back in Spain and close to his family. And from my perspective, honestly, it was just a feeling I had from meeting him and his friends. And as I started to learn about the culture, I was, kind of intrigued. The other thing I would say is that I think that Spain is a very progressive place in a lot of ways. For example, compared to Italy. And compared to France, again, I would say, maybe it's a little more relaxed. It's a very different vibe.
A little bit more open, maybe?
Yeah, more open. I agree.
The culture maybe a little bit more open.
Yeah.
Do you think a lot of that is why we're seeing a lot more Americans interested, or is there other factors? Because we touched on, in a previous conversation, we touched on COVID. So why do you think Americans are looking to Europe, and especially Spain?
So it's interesting that you mentioned COVID. I think that is a part of it. There are a lot of reasons that, people talk, because people are talking about this a lot. There are a lot of Americans coming to Spain. And I've heard people say, lifestyle is the obvious one. It's a very different lifestyle. It's more relaxed and more balanced. A lot of people are talking about, political considerations. Are people moving because they're less comfortable in the US? I think those are both factors, but I think the main factor is just exposure. It's just a question of, we don't in the US have as much of a history with Spain as we do with some other European countries, France or Italy, for example, as you mentioned. So it's not as much on the radar of people in the US, I think. I think that with COVID, like you mentioned, people started branching out a little bit and maybe, thinking in a different way about places they would like to explore and discover, and maybe that's part of it. And yeah, I think that, Spain is more and more on the radar of Americans and people in other places in the world in general. And as that continues to progress, I think we'll see more and more migration here.
We've been operating for a while, and we've been dealing with American clients for over the years. And some of the political thing is something that we've discussed with clients before. They see Europe as different, maybe in terms of how the political situation is. But also another topic that comes up is the cost of living. How is the cost of living in the US compared to Spain, for example?
That's definitely something that people talk about, and for sure a consideration for our clients coming from the US. I would say for me it was definitely a pleasant surprise when I got here. It wasn't something that really drove my decision to come here. But I mean, I was coming from New York also. It depends a lot on where you are in the US, but in general, obviously the cost of living is it's much more affordable here for sure. If you have an income in the US and you can live here, say for example, if you have US savings, or if you're taking advantage of the new digital nomad visa to work here remotely and have an income from the US, I think a lot of people would be very comfortable. My experience with the healthcare system in Spain, and from talking to other Americans and Canadians, for example, who are here, but Americans in particular, because obviously there's a big difference there. They have very positive things to say about the healthcare system in Spain. It runs very smoothly, it's very affordable. I personally have had a really good experience and no issues. And the healthcare system in the US is obviously very, very complex and could be very expensive. I mean, I personally had a situation in New York where I had to go to an emergency room, and this is very common. And I was there for a few hours and they sent me a $2,000 bill. And that can totally happen. That's not an anomaly.
Yeah.
And those, there's a very real impact of that on people's lives. There's very little transparency in the healthcare system. It's very difficult to plan for healthcare costs. I think that's a huge benefit in being here in Spain.
Yeah. It's the first time in the real estate business, is that right? There's a lot of talk at the moment about regulation of real estate agents in Spain, i.e. there is none, and if in certain parts of the country there is some, but it's very, very light touch. So how are real estate agents in the US regulated? How does it work there?
So real estate agents in the US do need to be licensed. The licensing requirements, I would say, are fairly basic compared to what you would need to do to be licensed to be, say, for example, an accountant or a lawyer or probably a mortgage advisor, I'm not sure. So, you take an exam, you need to meet continuing education requirements, you commit to adhering to a certain standard of ethics. So there is something there that is, structured and in place and designed to hold people accountable. And it's not, very requiring, but that does exist in the US.
So there is some sort of level that people have to actually...
Definitely, and it varies by state in the same way that, a lot of regulations vary by autonomous community here in Spain. So there is, a good amount of variety, but I would say in the basic requirements that real estate agents need to meet in order to be licensed, it's fairly similar across the country.
You spent 7 years studying to become an actuary, and, actuaries spend lots of time analysing risk and data and business trends and economics. How do you see what opportunities or risks do you see in the real estate market for investors?
The real estate market is very difficult to predict risk. It is inherently risky in a way, it's not like, but that's where the opportunity is. Actually, this sounds a little bit cheesy, but in the Society of Actuaries, the organization, the credentialing organization for my previous profession, has a motto that is risk is opportunity. And that's very true, risk is opportunity. I think, the difference between, say, for example, the real estate market and the stock market is in the stock market, you have agreed upon prices and everyone has very clear information about, what's going on. And in the real estate market, not so much. And I think in that environment, the people who do their homework are the people who can take advantage of that risk and turn it into opportunity.
Sure.
I think, especially here on the Costa del Sol, I see it as a very stable market, like we were saying earlier. Just from this perspective of the supply is so limited and there's so much demand, prices have to remain relatively stable. And beyond that, I think you need to do your homework and understand the market as well as you can and try to make decisions based on data. And kind of be the player who's making informed decisions, and that's the way to navigate the market.
Your actions obviously back up what you're saying, right? You've actually moved to Spain and you're actually personally investing in this market, right? Because you see that there's some longevity and positive uptrend.
Definitely, that's a great point. We really believe in what we're doing here. We're really happy here. We're really convinced that this is an area that will continue to develop economically. The director of international economic development in Malaga is actually an American from, I think you know him, from Texas actually. His name is Mark Sanderson. And I met with him to talk about, what's happening in Malaga and what is their vision for the city. And they have really good ideas and they're really, focused on promoting the area and you can already see a lot of that coming to fruition. So yeah, we really believe that it's a great place to live and again, it's a great investment.
So there's long-term growth in what we're doing.
Definitely, right? There's long-term growth in what we're doing. There's a future for sure. I'm really, really excited to see what this area looks like. In some places, even in the next couple of years, but in the next 10 years, come on, it should be really interesting.
I agree with you. I'd like to add a little bit to that. So I've been in Spain for 20 years. Just I'd like to mention that it's 20 years this month.
Congratulations.
I came here in 2004. The credit boom back then was huge. The wave of credit in Spain was massive. And then
Really interesting time to be here.
Then what was even worse is when the actual crash, you know, the Lehman Brothers, I believe it was, which affected the whole of the Western economies. Spain got hit very hard, along with we were called the pig countries, you know, Portugal, Italy, Greece, Spain and Ireland, not in that order. Because of the crash, because of how serious it was and how people's lives were affected, Spain, the European Union, and you know, the Western banks and stuff are a hell of a lot more controlled now.
That's true.
Yeah, and so therefore it's there isn't this kind of boom and bust. I don't get that feeling. So I feel that I'm more comfortable working in Spain at the moment because I can see it's more of a controlled upward rather than like it was in 2004 when I came, when it was just going wild.
Yeah.
And I feel for long-term prosperity, is that what we're looking for? We're talking 10 years, 20 years.
Yeah.
I feel that what we learned in the past, I think, is going to help us in the future. I don't know what you think about that.
That's really interesting. I mean, I think to a certain extent that's true. I think there will always be some kind of a cycle in real estate in particular. You know, they talk about this 18-year real estate cycle that repeats for good reason, to do with the timing of how, you know, the timing of how long it takes to build buildings and, you know, satisfy a supply, and how, you know, how that all comes together. So for sure, I think we'll continue to see some kind of a cycle, but I agree with you that, you know, in some ways things are more controlled than maybe they were at that point in time, and hopefully we learn some kind of a lesson from that perspective.
You've been here for 2 years. So what's your experience been? So has it all gone smoothly? Has it been plain
Super
sailing?
smooth, no issues at all.
No?
No. Yeah, no issues for sure. But I think normal issues. I mean, things that I didn't expect that I think, you know, you experience when you move to a foreign, like any foreign country. Really nice place to live. The people are really nice. You eat well. It's sunny. You spend more time outside in the street with people. There's a lot about the lifestyle here that's conducive to, you know, strong mental health, positive mental health.
Yeah.
And I definitely experienced that. I'm really happy here. And overall, it's been such a positive experience. And, you know, there's so much to learn from putting yourself in a different environment. There's so much to learn just from traveling, like just changing your physical environment even, you know, helps you to be creative and see things from a different perspective. But to move to a different country or to spend a significant amount of time in a different country takes that to a whole new level. And, you know, there are a lot of benefits of that, and I definitely feel them.
If you could give yourself some pointers, a bit of advice, after 2 years, what would it be?
If you're looking to move here, just from kind of a logistical perspective, I really believe in, you know, taking advantage of professionals and specialists wherever you need help. In general in life, I think it's useful to, you know, delegate where you can delegate and focus your strengths on the things that you're strong in. So take advantage of the help that is here, you know. If you're looking to buy a property, work with somebody who is specialized in that. If you need a mortgage, please work with a mortgage advisor. You know, I was talking to someone the other day who was saying that, you know, they were talking to a prospective lawyer who was saying that he wanted to do the mortgage for them. And which I think is a little bit of a trend here maybe.
Yep.
And you can speak to this much better than I can, but my feeling is that it, you know, is highly recommendable to work with a mortgage advisor who specializes in that experience. So in general, I mean, take advantage of you know, specialists and professionals around you where you need logistical help.
Yeah.
It's been such a great experience, and, you know, when you have the opportunity to be exposed to so many new things, I don't know, it's change, and sometimes it's easy, you know, to get anxious about change, and it's much nicer if you just let that go and kind of embrace what's happening. For an American, for example, but a lot of people maybe, you know, come from a cultural context that's not as relaxed. And I think a very stereotypical experience is that, you know, things don't move as quickly as what you're used to, or maybe it doesn't feel as orderly as what you're used to. And Spain is definitely not the most extreme version of that, but it is more relaxed. And there are pros and cons to everything in life, and there's a pro and a con to that. And the pro is that it's much more flexible, and you have to embrace that as well. That if you need somebody to bend a rule a little bit for you, they're much more willing to do it. If you need help, if you ask for it, I feel like people are much more willing to help you, to change things a little bit to help you. And that has a lot of value, I think.
You mentioned food. What is your favorite Spanish cuisine that you've come across?
Ooh. Oh, that's such a tough
question.
Tough question. I live in Peregalejo, which is on the east side of Malaga Centro. And the big thing in Peregalejo is obviously fried fish, boquerones, for example. So I think I have to give that as my favorite thing. It's not something you can eat every day, but I enjoy it a lot. And look, I mean, fish is healthy, no?
She's healthy.
Yeah. What about you? What is your favorite food?
No.
No?
My mom's tortilla de patata. That's always that's the one for me.
That's a good one. I have learned to make a pretty mean tortilla de patata, I think.
Excellent.
I don't know if it's as good as Alejandro's.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
If you'd like to get hold of Tena, you could. How do we get in touch with you? If
Yeah, so I would check out our website. It's crosbymillan.com, crosbymillan.com. And we have all of our contact information there, and also a lot of other great information for people who are interested in buying property here.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.